This video will go over your fraction quiz review key. Please feel free to skip to questions that you have specific questions about, or you can watch the entire video so that you can make sure that you're solving these problems correctly. When we are adding two fractions, our first step is to get common denominators. So for this problem, we could write out all the multiples of our original denominators: 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, and then 8 would be 8, 16, 24, 32, and so on. You're looking for your first match, meaning both lists have that number. In this case, it would be 24. So we know that's our common denominator. Now we need to figure out our new numerators. To get from 8 to 24, I would need to multiply by 3. I do that same thing to 7. 3 times 7 is 21. To get from 3 to 24, I multiply by 8. So I do that same thing to 2, which gets me 16. Now that our fractions have the same denominator, we're ready to add across the top. 21 plus 16 is going to give me a numerator of 37, and our denominator just stays the same. This fraction cannot be simplified, so this would be our final answer. For question 12, our first step is going to be to convert these mixed numbers to improper fractions. If you don't have to do that, that's fine, but converting to improper fractions can often save us some calculation errors that we get with mixed number subtraction. So we're going to do 12 times 5 plus 2 to get 62 over 5 minus 2 times 10 plus 1, 21 over 2. Now we find our common denominator, which in this case is 10. To get from 5 to 10, we multiply by 2, so I'm going to do that same thing to number 12. And when I do that, I get 124 for my numerator. To get from 2 to 10, I have to multiply by 5, so I do that same thing to 21, which gives me 105. Now we subtract our numerators. If necessary, we can go off to the side, and when I subtract, we get 19 over 10. This can't be simplified, so this would be our final answer. Our first step is to convert to improper. So 4 times 1 plus 1 gets me 5 fourths, being multiplied by 4 fifths. Now we multiply straight across. So when I do 5 times 4, I get 20, and when I do 4 times 5, I get 20. Now we need to think about, can we simplify? So 20 and 20 can both be divided by 20. When I do that, I end up with 1 over 1, which is the same thing as our whole number version, 1. If you were able to get to this final answer by looking at this fraction, that is perfectly fine. You could have converted straight to that whole number 1. For dividing fractions, we're going to use our strategy of keep, change, flip to make it into a multiplication problem, which is easier for us to look at. So I'm going to keep my first fraction as 5/6. I'm going to change my operation from division to multiplication, and I'm going to flip my second fraction to its reciprocal, which would be 2 over 1. Now I'm able to multiply straight across. When I do that, I get 5 times 2 is 10, and 6 times 1 is 6. Since both of these numbers are even, I know I can divide by 2 to simplify. When I simplify by 2, I end up with 5 over 3. This answer cannot be simplified, so that would be my final answer. Our first step is going to be to convert this mixed number into an improper fraction by using Popcorn or Texas method. When I do that, I get 5/3, and that's being added to 1/2. Now we need to find our common denominator, which for 2 and 3 could be 6. To get from 2 to 6, I multiply by 3. So I'm going to do that same thing to my numerator of 1 to get my new numerator. To get from 3 to 6, I have to multiply by 2. I do that same thing to 5 to get 10. Now I'm able to add across the top, so adding my numerators, and I get 13 over 6. This fraction cannot be simplified, so it can be my final answer. For this problem, our first step is going to be to convert to improper fractions. When I do that, I end up with 43 over 5 minus 37 over 5. Because our fractions already have the same denominator of 5, we're able to just go ahead and move on to subtracting our numerators. When I do that, I get 6 over 5. This can't be simplified, so it would be my final answer. For question 17, we're going to convert to improper as our first step. When I do that, I get 17/8 being multiplied by 7/2. Now we multiply across the top and the bottom. When I do 17 times 7, I get 119. 8 times 2 gives me 16. This cannot be simplified, so this is my final answer. For question 18, our first step is going to be to convert to improper fraction for our second fraction here. 3 times 1 gives me 3, plus 2 gives me 5/3. And we're dividing 4/9 by 5/3. We're going to use our strategy of keep, change, flip to solve this problem. So 4/9 gets to stay the same. Division changes to multiplication, and we flip our second fraction so it becomes its reciprocal of 3/5. Now we get to multiply across the top and the bottom to get 4 times 3 is 12, and 9 times 5 is 45. Both of these numbers can be divided by 3, so we can go ahead and simplify. When I divide 12 by 3, I end up with 4, and when I divide 45 by 3, I get 15. The fraction can no longer be simplified, so this would be our final answer. For question 19, we have a word problem. A math textbook is 7/8 inches thick. How many of these books will fit on a 28-inch shelf? Our first step is going to be to create the expression that we're going to solve for this problem. This problem might be helpful for us to draw a picture. So we can think about having a shelf that we're going to put books on. And this shelf is a total of 28 inches long. We're then going to put 7/8 inch thick books. So I'm going to have 1 book, 2 book, 3 book, and so on. And we want to know mathematically how many should fit on the shelf to where they're not being spilled over onto the edge. If I'm taking this total length and splitting it into individual book-sized chunks, that tells me I'm dividing. I'm dividing 28, our total, by our 7/8 inch thick chunks. For 28, anytime we have a whole number, that is the same thing as 28 over 1. So this is what our expression would be. Either of these would be acceptable. Now we're going to use keep, change, flip to solve. So 28 over 1 gets to stay. Then we're going to multiply that by the reciprocal of 7/8 by flipping it to 8 over 7. When we multiply our numerators of 28 and 8, we get 224. When we do 1 times 7 with our denominator multiplication, we get 7. Now when you have big numbers like this, one thing to check if we can simplify is to divide by our denominator. I don't know what 224 divided by 7 is off the top of my head, so I can come off to the side and do the division long-handed. So 7 won't go into 2, but it will go into 22 3 times, which gives me 21, which when I subtract leaves me with 1. I then bring down the 4, and 7 goes into 14 2 times. 7 times 2 gives me 14, which would result in no remainder. So 224 is divisible by 7, and it gives me 32. 7 is divisible by 7, and that gives me 1. Just like with 28 in our original expression, 32 over 1 is the same thing as 32, and this would be our final answer.